There is a sound every driver knows. The scream of an engine at full song, pushed right to the edge, and then nothing. Just silence. People think the greatest victory of my life happened on a racetrack. They were wrong. You think you know my story. You know a name, a famous name. You have seen the trophy, the champagne, the number one on the car, but you never saw the price. You never saw the boy who was handed that name before he was ready to carry it. And you never saw what it cost him just to wear this helmet. For years, I raced angry. I will be honest with you. I was angry at the world, angry at what it took from me, angry at what it asked me to become. So no, my greatest win was never a race. It was something quieter, something that took me almost my whole life to find. And to understand it, you have to go back, not to a circuit, not to a champion, but to a foggy night and a boy who lost everything. It happened on the night of the 29th of November, 1975, a cold, foggy night just outside London. My father was flying home. He was a two-time world champion, the most charming man in the sport. And that night he was at the controls of his own small plane, coming back from a test session in France. The fog was so thick, you could barely see 50 meters. Just before 10 at night, coming in to land near Elstree, the plane clipped the trees over a golf course and it came down. My father did not die alone. 5 other men were on board with him. The heart of his racing team, young talents, mechanics, a designer, all of them gone in a single moment. I was 15 years old. And then the second blow came, the one people forget. The plane had not been properly insured. My father's flying permissions had lapsed. So the lawyers came. One family sued, and slowly, it took almost everything we had left. We had lived in a house with 25 rooms. Within a few years, that world was simply gone. I was even called in and questioned as part of the investigation. A boy sitting in an office being asked about his dead father. My father wasn't there anymore. But somehow, every decision he made still followed us. That was the day I stopped being Graham Hill's son and started trying to become someone else. Here is the strange part. Racing was never really my dream. While other future champions were tearing up go-kart tracks as children, I was somewhere else entirely. I started on motorbikes in 1981, and to pay for it, I worked as a labourer on building sites. I was a motorcycle courier, riding through London traffic, delivering packages in the rain just to fund the next race weekend. That was my paddock. A dispatch office and a wet road. It was my mother who nudged me toward cars. She had already watched this sport take her husband. Bikes terrified her. So she pushed me toward a racing school, thinking 4 wheels would be safer. Think about that. The safer choice. The choice that would one day put me on the most dangerous stage in the world. And here is the truth. I rarely said out loud. For a long time, I did not believe I was good enough. Not good enough for Formula One. Not good enough to carry that name. By the time I finally became a test driver for a top team, I was already in my 30s. In racing terms, that is old. Most men my age were retiring. I was only just beginning. And every single time I pulled on my helmet, I saw them. 8 white oars, painted on dark blue, my father's design, his rowing club, his identity, sitting on my head. I was not chasing a childhood dream. I was chasing a ghost. And the hardest rival was never on the grid. It was my own surname. For years, all I had ever been was a son, a shadow, a later rival that everyone quietly doubted. And then, slowly, everything began to change. In 1992, one of the biggest teams in the sport, Williams, gave me a job, not as their star, as their test driver, the man who does the endless miles nobody ever sees so the real drivers can shine on Sunday. But I put my head down and I did the work. And in 1993, they finally gave me a race seat. And suddenly I was not carrying a package through the rain anymore. I was sitting in one of the fastest cars on the planet. And then it happened, the Hungarian Grand Prix, a long, hot, brutal afternoon. And I crossed the line first, my first ever Formula One victory. The boy who never thought he was good enough had just won. I still remember the sound of my own name crackling over the radio. Not my father's name, mine, Damon, winner. For one perfect moment, the 8 white oars on my helmet were not a weight anymore. They were mine. I had earned them. I stood on that podium and I let myself believe it, that the hard part was over, that the ghost was finally quiet. I had no idea what was coming. Because the next season had a name too, 1994. By 1994, I had the seat every driver dreamed of, and beside me in that garage sat the greatest of them all, Ayrton Senna, my teammate. I was the number 2, quietly learning from a master. Then came one weekend in May, Imola. On the Saturday, in qualifying, a young driver named Roland Ratzenberger lost his life. The paddock was still in shock. And then on the Sunday, during the race, we lost Ayrton too. No driver had been killed at a Grand Prix weekend in over a decade. And then in 2 days, 2 men were gone. I cannot fully describe what that silence felt like. Senna was not just a racing driver. To millions of people, he was hope itself. He carried the dreams of an entire nation on his shoulders. And then, just like that, he was gone. I looked around and I realized something terrifying. The master was gone. And I was the one left standing. Overnight, I went from the quiet number 2 to the only hope of the biggest team in the sport. The strange part is how little they seemed to value it. Later that season, the team brought back a bigger name and paid him around £900,000 for a single race. I was paid £300,000 for the entire year. I was carrying the team, but I was not the star. Still, I did the only thing I knew how to do. Just 4 weeks after we buried Ayrton, I won. Sometimes tragedy doesn't take your life. It hands you a weight that was never yours to carry. I carried it. But somewhere out there, a new rival was rising, and he would haunt me for years. They gave the new threat a name too, Michael Schumacher. I need you to understand something. I never saw him as a villain. I saw him as a measuring stick, a standard I was never quite sure I could reach. In 1994, we fought all the way to the final race. The whole title came down to one single point. And on the streets of Adelaide, our 2 cars touched. We both went out. And he was champion the next year, 1995. It happened again. Another collision, this time at Silverstone, right in front of my own home crowd. The win handed to someone else. And Michael, once again, just out of reach. People wanted me to hate him. I couldn't, because I already knew the truth about myself. I was nowhere near as good as him, and I'm never going to pretend that I was. But here is the strange gift he gave me. Having him as a foil brought out the most I could get out of myself. He dragged a version of me out into the light that I never knew was there. Years later, I tried to talk to him about our crashes. I told him he had to accept his share of the blame. He looked at me, and he simply could not admit he had ever been wrong. Not once. And in that moment, it hit me. That is exactly why he was the champion, and I was not. Because I always knew when I was wrong. By 1996, the car under me was finally the best on the grid. And I did not waste it. 8 wins that season. I never once qualified off the front row. And at the end of it, I beat my talented teammate Jacques Villeneuve to the title. I had done it. I was the Formula One world champion. I became the first son of a world champion to win the championship himself. The name Hill was mine now, in a way it had never been before. But I was 36 years old, and I could feel it. Schumacher was 26. He had time. I did not. In my own words, I was fighting the clock. Every season now was a race against the calendar, not just the other cars. And then came the cruelest part of the whole story. I had spent my entire life trying to earn that name, to step out of my father's shadow, to be seen. Damon finally became world champion. The world finally called him Damon, and Williams no longer needed him. They had already decided to replace me. In the very season I won it all, I was told I was leaving champion of the world and out of a job. No parade, no thank you. Just a decision made in a boardroom while I was still fighting on the track. I held that trophy. I waited for it to fix everything, to heal the boy from 1975. It didn't. So here is the truth. I look back and I see all of them. My father, gone in the fog, the name I could never escape, Senna, and the weight he left on my shoulders, Schumacher, the man I could never quite become, Williams, who let me go the moment I gave them everything. And I realized they were all the same opponent. Every one of them was just me, my own doubt, my own grief. I told you I was angry at the world. That anger drove me for 20 years, but it never once made me happy. So I put the helmet down, the 8 white oars, my father's design. I am not Graham Hill's son anymore. I am not even just world champion Damon Hill. I am simply Damon. The world remembers me as world champion. I remember myself as a boy who spent his whole life trying to make peace with one foggy night in November 1975, finding that peace, choosing it. That was the greatest victory of my life, because some men still live inside another name. And next time, I want to tell you about one of them.